Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 32 of Buha's Block. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a Lakers mailbag. I've been asking you guys to drop questions in the YouTube comment section, and you have delivered. So we will be going through those over the past couple weeks. It has been a rough week for Laker fans, from Dan Hurley rejecting the organization's 6-year, $70 million offer, to the tragic passing of Jerry West, to the Boston Celtics winning championship number 18. It's been a tough week. It has been a brutal week for Laker fans. But the good news for the Lakers is the 2023-24 season is officially over. The team can start talking to its free agents and starting to get an idea of what the league landscape will be in a couple weeks with the draft and with free agency. The new season is here. The Lakers can put last season behind them and move forward and start plotting for how they can try and get banner number 18 and tie the Celtics once again. So without further ado, let's get into our mailbag. First question from @Shimulu Weiss. Is there any circumstance that D'Lo is a Laker next season? Well, yes, there are a couple of circumstances I can see in which D'Lo is a Laker next season. One would be D'Lo opts in and the Lakers just can't find the right trade this offseason. Despite D'Lo being an expiring contract, teams still aren't willing to trade for him, or the Lakers can't find a third team potentially, and D'Lo just ends up starting the season on the roster. I think in that case, the Lakers would still look to shop him and try and move him by the 2025 trade deadline in February. But that is one scenario. I can see D'Lo starting the season and being a Laker for at least half of this upcoming season. The other one would be D'Lo opting out and not having much of a market. Maybe he thinks Orlando or San Antonio is going to come in with an offer and something changes and that team goes in a different direction, and all of a sudden D'Lo does not have much of a market just because of the select teams that have cap space, and some of those teams being in a more rebuilding phase and already having point guards or lead guards on their roster. And then without much of a market, D'Lo ends up re-signing on like a 2 or 3 year deal, maybe at the non-taxpayer MLE. And that is a more manageable contract. And then he could once again be traded by December 15th. Although at that point he's making less money. So your options are a bit limited in terms of the types of trades he could be included in. And then also he's on a multi-year deal. So the team taking him back has to be willing to take him back for multiple years. But I really like this question because I think it's an entry point into an interesting conversation over the next couple of weeks, which is how things shake out around the league with free agency. Because as ESPN's Brian Windhorst reminded everyone a couple of days ago, the new collective bargaining agreement allows for teams to start negotiating with their own free agents the second the NBA season ends, the second the NBA finals end. So with the finals ending on Monday night, the Lakers, as well as the other 29 teams, can start negotiating with their incumbent free agents and start to figure out if they can come to terms with some of those. And they can't officially sign anything until July 6th. But similar to like June 30th and July 1st, when the majority of contracts will be signed and there will be that initial flurry, you can agree to terms, and you can agree to terms earlier. So as for how this applies to the Lakers, the first and biggest domino is going to be LeBron James and what he decides to do in terms of opting out versus opting in, and how that affects the Lakers' financial flexibility. Like they are, as I've said many times on here, they are operating as if LeBron James is going to be back. It's just a matter of, is he going to opt out and resign and get that no trade clause but make a few $1 million less, or is he going to opt in and extend in August and make some more money but lose out on that no trade clause? So that is the first thing. But the second thing then becomes D'Angelo Russell and what he decides to do. And there's going to be a lot of legal and illegal communication over the next couple weeks. But what this does is it allows for teams to start signing guys. And once you see the musical chairs of free agency, some of the things start to get settled and some of the teams start to lose cap space, then all of a sudden we can start piecing it together. So does Paul George end up re-signing with the Clippers? Does Klay Thompson end up re-signing with the Golden State Warriors? What happens with DeMar DeRozan and the Chicago Bulls? And those are some of the bigger names that could be on the move. And if they don't come to terms with their respective teams, it does not mean it's not going to happen and they will not test the market and maybe just end up re-signing. But it could be a sign that those players are on the move. And if those players are on the move, that potentially affects the market for a guy like D'Angelo Russell, because D'Angelo Russell is not going to be anyone's first choice in free agency. He's going to be the fourth or fifth or sixth option. And looking at a team like Orlando, who has been the buzziest team with D'Angelo Russell over the last few weeks, Kelly Iko of The Athletic also recently reported that the Orlando Magic have interest in D'Angelo Russell. So looking at it from that perspective, D'Lo only really makes sense for Orlando if they strike out on a Paul George, a Klay Thompson, a Malik Monk, and some of the other top perimeter options in free agency. And there's a chance that they could fit D'Lo alongside one of those guys depending on what his contract looks like. But as we start to see some of these guys resign or not resign, that will be a clue as to what the market potentially looks like for a guy like D'Angelo Russell and how that ultimately affects the Lakers. So I still think, as I've said for the past several weeks, like if we are leaning one way or the other, it's still leaning more toward D'Lo not being a Laker next season, be it him opting in and getting traded, be it him opting out and signing with another team. And then the third option would be getting traded at some point in the season, be it him opting in and there not being much of a market right now, or him opting out and re-signing and then not being eligible to be traded until December 15th. But there are some ways, again, if there is no trade market or if there is no free agent market for him, it could make sense for him to either opt in or for him to re-sign on a smaller multi-year deal, and then the Lakers could trade him deeper into the season. Okay, next question from @08Mamba. Do we need to re-sign Max with the MLE, or can we use Arenas rights? So he's referencing the Gilbert Arenas provision, which is a tool that helps allow teams to sign their second round picks or undrafted free agents after their first couple of seasons, similar to what happened with Austin Reeves last year, where there was a cap where teams could not offer him more than the mid-level exception for the first couple years, and then they could have backloaded that third and fourth year, and then had the Lakers matched, they would have had to choose to either accept the contract structure as is or smooth it over and even it out in terms of the salary cap hit. Now that did not happen. Austin did not end up signing a contract with the San Antonio Spurs. He ended up just re-signing with the Lakers for the maximum that they could offer. But the point of the Arenas provision is to give the incumbent team a leg up in terms of limiting what that player can be offered and encouraging that player to stay with that team and rewarding a team for identifying a talent, drafting a talent, and not just having that player break out and leave. So there is a limitation to the type of contract that Max Christie could get, and that starting annual year would be the non-taxpayer MLE of $12.9 million. Like, I don't think someone signing Max to like a 3-year, $40 million deal or a 4-year, $52 million deal or something along those lines. Like, I think his market is going to be less than that. So the Lakers have a couple of options here. Max is a restricted early bird free agent. And with an early bird free agent, you have two options. Option one is you can re-sign the free agent to 175% of their previous year's salary. So for Max, he made $1.7 million last year, roughly. And 175% of that would bring him to about $3 million as a starting salary for next season. I think Max is worth more than that. He would get more than that, even in a restricted free agency market. So we could throw option one out the window. But option two is 105% of the previous year's average annual salary across the league. So that was about $8.6 million. So you do 105% of that, gets you closer to around $9 million. So in that scenario, unless the Lakers are going to dip into their non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which will only be available to them if D'Angelo Russell opts out and does not re-sign, then the most the Lakers can offer Max in that first year is around $9 million. As I reported on a previous mailbag, I've heard the average annual range for Max will likely be in the $6 to $8 million range. However, Sam Vecini said on this podcast last week that he would not be surprised if that number jumps up closer to $8 to $10 million annually, and a smart team tries to swoop in and steal Max Christie from the Lakers. So in that case, depending on where the Lakers are at in terms of the first apron and the second apron, like anything $9 million or less is fine. If it gets closer to $10 million, the Lakers might have to shed some salary to clear up that space to retain Max and not go over that second apron. It's basically going to be a hard cap for them, and as it is for most teams across the league, where it's difficult to justify going over the second apron with all the restrictions that come with it. So with that, like, it's really going to come down to what happens with LeBron and his contract, what happens with D'Lo and his contract, what happens with the number 17 pick. Do the Lakers end up trading that? Do they end up trading up and getting a more expensive player? Do they end up trading back and getting a less expensive player? Do they buy a pick in the second round? Like, there's so many moving parts with this that it's difficult to say in terms of what would happen if Max ends up signing with another team from a restricted free agency standpoint. But as I've said several times, the Lakers have a strong interest in retaining Max. And I thought it was interesting that ESPN, when they were reporting on the Dan Hurley situation, singled out Max along with Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura as the Lakers' young foundation. And I think that was intentional. I don't think that happens if the Lakers aren't intending to keep Max Christie this summer. So I think whether it's somewhere in the $6 to $8 million range, or maybe it creeps up closer to $9 million, that is what the Lakers are working with in terms of their options to keep Max, unless they just unload the non-taxpayer MLE on him. But I think the preference obviously would be to sign him with that 105% or less, and then use the non-taxpayer MLE if D'Lo opts out on a different player, just to improve the depth and the quality of the rosters. But that is the breakdown. Hope it wasn't too complicated with the arena stuff. Question 3 from @Derek Chapman2595 is the 3-and-D wing we're looking for already on the roster. What about Max Christie? I think you're onto something here, Derek. Now, the one thing with Max is I view him more as like a 2 or a 2.5. I don't think he has the size and the strength to scale up to being like a 3 or a 3.5 full time. And ideally, your 3-and-D wing, especially if it's going to be like, when we talk about the 3-and-D wing, ideally that player is slotting into the third front court spot next to LeBron and AD. Maybe you have a couple of 3-and-D wings at the 2 and the 3, but I think you need a guy with a little bit more size and strength and physicality than Max. But in terms of at the shooting guard position, we've talked a lot about a guy like KCP. Like, I think Max Christie can have that type of impact. I think KCP is obviously in the 90 to 99th percentile of what a Max Christie could be. And there are differences in their games. I'm loosely using the terms like 3-and-D player, but look at the past 2 seasons. As a rookie, Max Christie shot 41% on catch and shoot threes. As a sophomore, though he shot 35, I want to say just under 36% overall on threes, he still shot 39% on catch and shoot threes. So he's shown through his first 2 years, he's basically a 40% catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And you contrast that to a guy like Cam Reddish, who his defense is a bit flashier, he's a bit bigger, he's a bit more athletic, but he shot 32% on catch and shoot threes last year. And many of those were wide open threes. So looking at a guy like Max, I think he can play a larger role. I thought he did play well when he was given the opportunity. Last year, he got squeezed in the rotation in March once the Lakers added Spencer Dinwiddie and Cam Reddish became healthy again momentarily, and Gabe Vincent became healthy, and Max all of a sudden was on the outside looking in. But if you look at that stretch from like December through February, I thought he played really well when given an opportunity during that stretch. I think the Lakers fumbled that situation. As I've previously reported, the Lakers felt that situation was fumbled in terms of Max and his development. Again, like I think he has to add some more size and physicality and tenacity to play like a full-time small forward. I think, again, he's more of a shooting guard, but I'd like to see more Max Christie, Austin Reeves minutes next season. I think that is a tandem that makes a lot of sense. And we talk about this like elusive 3-and-D wing, and I think you need multiple in 2024 and 2025, especially if you're competing with the likes of the Boston Celtics. You're going to need multiple types of guys who can switch and defend a Tatum, a Brown, a White, a Holiday. And I think Max Christie can be one of those guys with the proper development. And he's shown it already with his three-point shooting in catch-and-shoot situations, but also with his on-ball defense. And I think about the Cleveland game where he was defending Donovan Mitchell. I think about the New York game where he was defending Dante DiVincenzo and even Jalen Brunson in certain bursts. Like, I think that the talent is there. The potential is there. He's only 21. He's younger than some players that are going to go in the first round of the 2024 NBA draft. I think the Lakers need to retain Max Christie and just develop him and make him a top 8 or top 9 rotation player next season and see where it goes. If you give him at least 15 to 18 minutes a night, if not more, I think there is something there in terms of his 3-and-D capabilities. Smart cutter, a good rebounder. He's athletic, just a good basketball player. I think the Lakers need to re-sign Max, develop Max, and give him a role that he can grow in. And if they do that, I think they will have a solid 3-and-D player on their hands. Next question from @RonaldGiddens758. Could the Lakers get Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter? Yes, the Lakers can technically make this trade, but it's a bit tricky. I will show you here how this trade would be possible. The version that would likely have to happen, because the Lakers are not including LeBron James or Anthony Davis in this trade, it would have to be D'Angelo Russell opting in, and then you throw in D'Lo, Rui, Austin, Gabe Vincent, and Jared Vanderbilt, all of the Lakers' middle-sized contracts for Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter. The Lakers would be saving about $5.6 million. Atlanta would be taking on $5.6 million, but they'd be getting off of the contracts of Young and Hunter. I assume the Lakers will be throwing in at least a couple of picks, if not all three, and then who knows with the pick swaps and whatnot. And it gets complicated. You are now also adding 3 extra players to the Hawks, so they have to figure out their salary situation and if they're going to offload some of those guys. And during the offseason, it's not as much of a concern. You can stretch your roster out to, I believe it's as many as 20 players. So that's not a concern for now, but the Hawks would have to figure out, are they going to reroute some of these guys? And maybe this trade theoretically could expand into a 3-team deal, but I do not see this happening. If you are the Lakers in this scenario, you do have LeBron, AD, Trae, and DeAndre Hunter, and then basically nothing else. You have Max Christie potentially if you re-sign him, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Maxwell Lewis, Christian Wood, maybe the number 17 pick, although it's probably going to Atlanta, and then some vet minimum guys, maybe an exception, although I'd have to really break down the numbers. I think they'd have they'd probably have the taxpayer MLE available, so $5 million exception plus a bunch of minimum guys. So you get your third star, you get a solid wing in DeAndre Hunter, but it costs you all of your mid-sized salaries, all of your key role players around LeBron and AD, and it decimates your depth. And your starting lineup is looking something like LeBron, AD, Trae, DeAndre Hunter, and Max Christie, which I like that starting lineup. I think you are putting some solid shooting and perimeter defense around your 3 stars, but there's basically no bench. It's going to be you're going to need to really rely on Christian Wood, maybe Cam Reddish, Jackson Hayes, depending on what they do. But then what happens with the number 17 pick and Jalen Hood-Schifino, you just don't have a lot of depth there. And I think as we've seen through the playoffs, you need a solid 7 to 8 man rotation. I think the Lakers would be a player or 2 or maybe even 3 short. So I don't see the Lakers doing this. I don't see the Hawks doing this. I could see the Hawks maybe trading one of these guys. And as I've said in previous shows and mailbags, I've heard the Lakers have shifted their priorities and are leaning more toward upgrading the supporting cast rather than mortgaging all their assets for a third star. So looking at ways they can upgrade a starting spot or 2, maybe a bench spot or 2, and revamping the roster that way rather than throwing all their chips into a third star and having a roster that has some deficiencies, particularly in terms of role players and quality 3-and-D two-way guys. So that is the way that I've heard the Lakers are leaning, and this trade would go against that. Certainly, if Donovan Mitchell is available, I think that is one exception, as I've been saying. Like that's the one guy that I could see the Lakers maybe going all in for if he becomes available, but there are no indications that that is the case. It seems like he's going to be staying in Cleveland for now. So I don't see this type of trade happening. Next question from @Lakers versus Haters. Do you think the Lakers go back to trying to trade for Dejounte Murray again? I really think Murray can fit this team well. Again, as I've been saying for several weeks now, I've heard the Lakers are leaning more toward upgrading the supporting cast rather than going for a third star. However, if you look at the potential stars that are available, I do like the fit of Dejounte Murray more than some other stars. Like, I think he would fit better than Trae Young, especially if you can keep Austin Reeves. I like a potential Dejounte Murray, Austin Reeves backcourt much more than a Trae Young, Austin Reeves backcourt. I think Murray would have complemented Reeves very well this season had the Lakers been able to pull off that trade. So I think Murray makes sense and makes more sense than a Trae Young or even potentially a Darius Garland, just because of his size, his physicality, his athleticism, his defensive ability, especially in comparison to a Young or a Garland. And if you could potentially throw in an extra pick and keep Austin Reeves, then I really like the fit there of Murray, Reeves, LeBron, and AD, depending on what the trade package ultimately ends up looking like. So I think Donovan Mitchell is obviously a better player, and I think as a top 20 guy, like, you would rather have him than Dejounte Murray. I think Mikal Bridges is a much better fit. Also, in my opinion, a better player. Pretty close, but like I would lean toward Bridges and would check a lot of the boxes of what the Lakers need in terms of a 3-and-D two-way talent on the wing. But after those two, I think you can make a case Dejounte Murray in comparison with a Trae Young or Darius Garland. He makes the most sense then at like that number 3 spot if we're ranking the stars and their potential fit. Also, because I think he would cost less than a Trae Young and a Darius Garland. But then I think he fits in better in a playoff situation without being that defensive liability that you can really target. Next question from @Antonio Roses. What do you think JHS's value is right now? We know it isn't high, but if he was traded for draft compensation, do you think he could get a heavily protected first, a second, 2 seconds, or is he virtually worthless? This is an interesting question because I really don't know the answer. If I had to take a guess, I think the Lakers, especially in this draft, because this draft is perceived to be weaker, at least in terms of like top end talent. And like basically the running assessment has been chop off the top 6 or 7 or even 8 of a regular draft and start the draft there. And if you look at it through that lens, then that means the number 17 pick is more like a number 25 or 26 or 27 pick. And through that lens, like I think the Lakers could get a late first for JHS probably, like in this draft, if it was a team that was really high on him. But it has to be a specific team that like needs point guard or backcourt help, believed in him and had him higher on their board. Because I know going back to last year, there were some people around the league that were surprised by the JHS pick and him going as high as he did. And some people had him more as like a pick in the 20s or even an early second round pick. So the Lakers taking him at number 17 was a surprise to some. And for that reason, I think the way that he struggled in year one certainly did not increase his value. Like JHS had more value on draft night than he does right now. I would like ballpark it as like late first, early second. He still is so young that there's a lot of potential. He did show growth and development in the G League, did not translate to the NBA level, so that is one consideration there. But there are always teams that will look for underappreciated assets, and I could see JHS being considered one by some team. But I think more likely than shipping him off for like a late first or early second is him being packaged together in a bigger deal. Next question from @RobS4491. Jovan, do you think we have a chance of signing DeMar DeRozan? There's always a chance, but I do not see it happening unless DeMar is making it a priority to get back home, get to LA, play for his favorite team, growing up. The most the Lakers can pay him is the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which starts at about $12.9 million. He can get more than that on the open market. I suspect he will get more than that on the open market. So he would have to be willing to take a discount. And even then, I don't love the DeRozan fit. Like, yes, it adds another scorer, another clutch shot maker, another guy who can attack defenses with over-the-top shot making, which is very important. And I think there are elements of like he would certainly help in crunch time and fourth quarters and give them a legit third 20-point per game scored. He scored at least 20 points in 11 consecutive seasons. So like DeMar DeRozan is a walking bucket. My bigger concerns are he's not a good three-point shooter and he's not a good perimeter defender. And I think if you're going to be playing on the wing for the Lakers, you need to be at least one of those two, if not both. And I would assume the Lakers would probably play him at small forward, though it depends on what the rest of the roster looks like. And at that point, like I just don't think you are good enough defensively and don't have the proper spacing. Now, look, at $12.9 million, you're not really going to complain. And the Lakers probably do that, and you have to give it a hard look. But I think in terms of like what the Lakers need, I think if they are adding a third star type, ideally that player again is a plus shooter who can play off the ball more and or a better defender. And DeRozan doesn't really check either box. So at $12.9 million, there are different expectations for sure. And I think he would make the Lakers better. I think he could fit. I just think the Lakers need a little bit more defense and shooting on the wings. And that would be my one concern with that type of move. And then there's just the reality of DeRozan having more of a market and likely getting more money elsewhere. So I do not see DeRozan to the Lakers happening, but it would certainly be interesting if it did. Next question from @JBake248556. Could the Lakers and Suns do a Bron for Devin Booker trade? Yes, technically they could do a Bron for Devin Booker trade, and you'd have to match salaries, and I'd have to look into that right now. I'm not going to, because I'm going to say the Lakers are not going to trade LeBron James, and I've seen this floated out there of maybe a LeBron for Paul George type trade. That just does not make sense. LeBron James is a better player than Paul George. And yes, Paul George is younger and will likely play beyond 2 more years. And that seems to be the trajectory that LeBron is on in terms of playing for a couple more years and then retiring. So like, yes, Paul George longer term in like 2027, 2029 will have more value than LeBron James because he will be playing and LeBron will be retired most likely. But LeBron James in 2024 is a better player than Paul George. I would rather have LeBron James than Paul George. The Lakers would rather have LeBron James than Paul George, and they're not going to trade LeBron. I think if LeBron is going to end up elsewhere, it is going to be him opting out and just leaving and signing with another team. Really, the only team that would make sense would be the Philadelphia 76ers, unless LeBron is willing to sign for the minimum or sign for one of the exceptions. So I just want to put that to rest. The Lakers are not trading him. He's not going to Phoenix. And if you're Phoenix, why would you trade Devin Booker for LeBron James? You have Devin Booker, a franchise cornerstone, a young all-star, all-NBA caliber guy, a guy, in my opinion, who is a top 15 guy and has been a borderline like top 10, 12 guy at various points. Why would you trade that for like a couple years of LeBron when you could have Booker for the next 7 to 10 years potentially? So I don't see it making sense for either side, but I could just say from the Lakers side, like, they're not trading LeBron. I don't know why that keeps getting put out there. If LeBron is not a Laker next season, I believe it's going to be he is going to opt out and just sign somewhere else, do a sign and trade somewhere else, but it's not going to be to Phoenix for Devin Booker. And final question from JBake248556. Do you think JHS and Max Lewis could step in and contribute for meaningful minutes? For a longer and more in-depth answer on this, I will point you to my previous episode with Sam Vecini. I ask him about JHS and Maxwell Lewis, and he goes deep on both guys as prospects and what he saw from them as rookies and in the G League and what he thinks they could ultimately become. So definitely check out the previous episode for a better answer on that. But from my opinion, I think yes, there is the potential for one or both to end up becoming rotation guys. With Maxwell Lewis, you see the outlines of a 3-and-D guy. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism. It's really about translating that at the NBA level. So with him, he's more of a project, and I think it's going to take some time for him to find his bearings at the NBA level. With JHS, I think like the talent and the potential are there. Again, if you watch garbage time and Laker games, you're not really going to see that. But if you look at the G League level and some of the shot making and the playmaking that he had for the South Bay Lakers, like there's something there. And can he translate that to the NBA level? The one thing I will say is he did often have the ball, and he is someone who I think at this point in their career needs the ball to be most effective. And the issue with that is you have LeBron James, you have Anthony Davis, you have Austin Reeves, you have potentially D'Angelo Russell, you have Gabe Vincent, maybe Spencer Dinwiddie's back. Like maybe the Lakers draft someone at number 17 who's better than JHS from a backcourt perspective. So JHS is just buried in the offensive hierarchy, and he really has to break through and show significant strides to earn that type of role and that type of playing time. So it's certainly within the realm of possibility. I'm interested to see how he performs at Summer League, how he looks, how his jumper looks, how his confidence looks, and then how that translates into training camp and the preseason and the early parts of the regular season. Of course, there's also a chance he ends up getting moved as part of a package. And as we discussed, maybe he gets viewed as like a late first, early to mid second round pick. I really think his value is in the eye of the beholder, but I think it is within the realm of possibility that JHS is the Lakers' backup point guard next season, depending on what happens with D'Lo and Gabe Vincent and what the Lakers do with the draft and free agency. I could see it, but I think he has to grow as a shooter, as a decision maker, as a defender, and just overall, basically in all facets of the game. If he could show a increased level of confidence and some better focus and decision making just across the board, I think there's a chance for him to be a back end rotation guy as early as next season. There are plenty of reasons to be skeptical with JHS. I think it's too early to completely write him off, but there have been some red flags through his rookie season. Remember, he's also coming off of back surgery. We'll see how that impacts things, if at all, this summer. But that'll do it for today's mailbag. As a reminder, please drop your questions below, and I will make sure to answer them the best I can in the next mailbag. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment and like this video if you enjoyed it. For those on Spotify, Apple Music, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back later in the week, potentially, with a reaction to a coaching announcement. And if not that, I will have another draft preview, another draft guide. So be on the lookout for that on about Thursday or Friday for the draft stuff. But that'll do it for today. I appreciate you guys watching and listening. I will talk to you soon.